Okay, amongst the business school students exists a blank that the more blank the material, the less bearing it will have on their respective futures. Now we can stop right there. There's a whole lot of blankage going on, so to speak. That is, we really don't have much in terms of clues. We just have these blanks. So what do we do at this point? Well, this is where we want to deal with what I call hidden clues. And hidden clues, the idea here is that anywhere in the text completion can be a clue for any one of the blanks. Usually the clues are close to the blanks, but not always. Sometimes the clues can come in the second, third, or even fourth sentence in the case of a 3-blank text completion. Luckily here we're only dealing with 2 sentences, but if there's no clue for the first or the second blank in the first sentence, then it's got to be in the second sentence. So let's take a look here. So reading from here, this unspoken notion is by no means blanked. So what unspoken notion? Well, let's go back to the beginning. These business school students, there exists a unspoken notion or a blank, ... ending right here. Then this unspoken notion, we can say, oh yes, indeed this agrees with the first blank or corresponds with the first blank. And so now we just have to go down here to the answer choices and say, okay, which word means unspoken notion? Now the word tacit here, if something's tacit, it is agreed on by one or more parties, but without ever being stated. People just know this is the case, so we're not going to verbalize it. That is the unspoken part there. So tacit belief corresponds to unspoken notion, and there's our answer for the first blank. Now looking for the hidden clue, we have to look further in the second sentence, and I'm talking, of course, about the hidden clue for the second blank. Do not be confused here by this third blank, but read over it, because again, you want to try to answer this if possible. Of course, a strategy is not necessarily pertaining to this text completion, but if you're really struggling, let's say on the second blank, you can always skip to the third blank. You don't have to do them sequentially. But in this case, we'll see that it works out pretty well to do them sequentially, and in essence, we're actually going to be doing them somewhat together. So let me show you what I mean. So we read on. It says this unspoken notion is by no means blanked by the finding that business leaders who read voraciously cite as their favorite works books that offer practical guidance. That's the key. So business leaders read those books that are practical. So going back here to the second blank, what sort of material is going on here? Is it the more practical the material, the less bearing it will have on the respective careers, or is it perhaps the opposite? If it is the opposite, then we have to determine what the third blank will be. And now I think it's a good time to actually look down on the bottom. Are we dealing with the word similar to practical or opposite? And you'll see here that the word theoretical is the opposite of practical. So we can assume that most likely this is the answer, but if that's the case, now that we've found this hidden clue over here, what must the third blank be? And so you can see that now the 2 blanks are going together. So if we assume that theoretical is the answer to the second blank, that the more theoretical the material, the less bearing it will have on their respective futures, this unspoken notion is by no means blanked by the fact that business leaders actually read practical books. So if business school students believe that theoretical books don't really have much bearing on their future, they're right, because business leaders are showing that they are really influenced by practical books, so to speak. So therefore, this notion is by no means challenged by the business leaders, and you can see that theoretical then matches up with challenged. And so this is a very difficult one. It's probably one of the more difficult ones in this text completion module. But the key is sometimes you do have to break the rules a little bit. If you can't quite come up with your own word, you can know that practical, for instance, has to be the clue for the second blank, and therefore maybe it's practical or maybe the opposite, and then you can look down at the answers. So don't always feel you always have to come up with your perfect own word. You can look at the answers, but the key is, of course, looking at the answers once you've really thought through and dissected the sentence. So there are answers: tacit belief, theoretical, and challenged.